About 15 or so more seconds. Plenty of both. All right, 10 seconds. I need good answers. If I give you time to talk, I need good. See what? Okay. So, talk to me, Hilda. Give me some ways in which imperialism demonstrates continuity. Sure. How? What about imperialism demonstrates a continuity of manifest destiny? So why don't we title this idea in American history of expansionism? That this is a good continuity, good word for it. That there's this philosophy, this belief of expansionism, of spreading out. Good. I like that. I like that. Johnny, what you got, continuity-wise?
I thought that they kept on having a conflict with
conflict. And nobody, back to the point about expansion, is nobody expands without pushing somebody else out of the way. And pushing somebody out of the way causes conflict. Good. Christoph, what else? Mexican-American War is another example of using the military to spread out. Sure. Eliam, what else?
The search for a new safety valve.
Ooh, this philosophy of a safety valve. This idea of the frontier. Frederick Jackson Turner in your test argued the frontier was closed. Imperialism, in theory, argues that we have a new frontier. Good. These are all good continuities, yes?
Could you also say they tried to get other territories through diplomatically, but then in the end they went to conflict?
Sure. So you got a good point. That a lot of it's diplomatic attempts, and then when that doesn't work, military. Like the Mexican-American War, right? Like the Native American conflicts, sure. And then the Spanish-American War, absolutely. That's a good point. There's one more continuity up here.
seeking better economic compensation.
Sure. This idea of resources is a good continuity. Attaboy. Good job, Caesar. Not what I was thinking of, but a phenomenal one. What else is the strong continuity that's present throughout expansionism, manifest destiny, imperialism? Talk to me.
I thought like natives were often, Native Americans were often like forced out of their land.
So this idea of force, whether it's a Native American or a Native Philippine or a Native Cuban, absolutely.
Superiority.
Yeah, white superiority. Good job, guys. That was a really fruitful discussion, though. Nicely done. Nicely done. Then throughout expansionism, imperialism, throughout, a lot of it is justified or motivated by this belief that we know better. We are here to tell you what you do not know.
Like Bible started, right?
In a sense, yeah, we'll talk about that today. All right. Now, what are some clear changes? Somebody bring in their freaking... Be ready.
Expanding the territories outside of the New World.
Yeah, we're going outside the continent, so to speak, right? Indian Manifest Destiny was sea to shining sea. Did we do that? Yeah. We went from one ocean to the other. So what's a change is where? Good, talk to me.
And white man's burden, like they started justifying their annexation of territories with that.
Talk to me. What about white man's burden?
Like the Philippines, we have to Christianize them, we have to...
Beautiful. So this idea, before this, for the most part, when we're spreading out, what are we doing with the people that are there? As we spread out before imperialism, what are we doing with the existing people that are where we spread out to? We're pushing them, right? So this idea of white man's burden of Christianizing, that's new. Although I will push back on Santos a little bit and say that you can make an argument that this is already happening how before this? Dawes Act. Yeah. only because we were out of space to push the Indians too. So I was like, let's put them on reservations, give them education, and give them Jesus. Just what they always wanted. So yeah, you're right. Santos, in general, this is new. But you can argue that the seeds of this white man's burden and Christianization, these seeds are planted with the Dawes Act in this attempt to start Americanizing, Christianizing, educationizing the Americans with the Dawes Act. Yes, ma'am.
I want to discuss this kind of like now that there was start of a lack of isolation.
Yeah, involvement. How about that? Instead of isolationism.
Yeah.
Right? This is kind of a violation of this Washingtonian's farewell address. The Washingtonian perspective of mind your own business, don't get involved with other places. Now here we are in 1898, like what? Washington?
Who?
You mean like Booker T. Washington?
Who?
He around. Good. Good. How about this one too, like territorial control? Up to this point, what did we do with every piece of land we acquired?
Make it to a state.
It became America. This is a big change that now, and we're going to talk about this today in class, now it's like we're getting land, but it's not becoming land like everybody else. It's becoming controlled land. Right? Go way back, I told you about this at the time, the only good thing in the Articles of Confederation is the Northwest Ordinances. And we talk about how the Northwest Ordinances, it's important they ban slavery, they allow for education. But you can make an argument the most important thing the Northwest Ordinances did is it established that when we get new land, that land gets enough people, that land will become a state, and that state will be equal with every other state. And then we apply that philosophy to the Northwest Ordinances, the Northwest Territory. We apply that philosophy to the Louisiana Purchase. We apply that philosophy to the Mexican Cession. We apply that, and eventually we stop applying that philosophy. And no longer does this new territory that we get become a state. It instead becomes a controlled territory. Colony, in a sense, yeah. We're not going to call it colonies because that sounds European and bad. We're going to call it a territory or a protectorate because we have to protect it. Yeah, you know, this is the American way. It's much, much better than the European way. Louis thought I was being serious. That's right, America. Right? Here I thought Peter Lopez was the biggest redneck in English. Yeah. So, do you want to get into what you actually are after what happened to you last Thursday? Oh my God. For like 15 straight minutes of just history jokes about him being Indian, bro. That's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
White power over here.
Bro, these videos go on YouTube, right? I have to make clear for the video, the person saying white power is actually an 88-pound Hispanic man. Now, today we'll talk lecture 1 of period 7, American Imperialism. I'm going to leave these margins up because you guys did a phenomenal job of brainstorming what's new and what's the same, and that makes me really, really happy. Nicely done. Your prompt is here. Evaluate the extent to which America's imperial ventures. It even sounds kind of nice. Let's call it what it is, colonization. Imperial ventures from 1890 to 1910 demonstrated change in American politics and society. All right, so we'll talk about some of the political debates about this, some of the societal ramifications. I think it'll be quite fun. Today we have a bullet-pointed outline, looks like this. It's on your notes as well, so you can get a kind of a update in terms of where we're going, how we're going to get there. We'll start with the origins. We'll talk about reasons and causes, justifications, if you will. Spanish-American War, which evolves quickly into the Philippine-American War. I remember on your test for period 5, one of your questions was which foreign conflict was most the result of this ideology. It was a Manifest Destiny cartoon. And option 1 was the Mexican-American War. Option 2 was the War of 1812. Option 3 was the Spanish-American War. And I swear to God, 90 were like, isn't this the same thing? Right? And I'm like, come on, people. Mexico and Spain are two different places. Today we'll fight the Spanish-American War. We'll talk about the imperialist policies and arguments. So big stick diplomacy, dollar diplomacy, moral diplomacy, which begs the question, what do we do to impose our will in other countries? Is it better to use the carrot? Is it better to use the stick? And then we'll look at a thesis statement with context at the end, and we will be good to go. The carrot and stick, did you say? Yeah. What do I use, the carrot or the stick?
Carrots and white.
So you think I like carrots? What does it mean? Why do they do it?
You look like you like carrots.
I do like vegetables. You like the 12 grains of rice that you get to eat. So,
Put a pounds, mister.
what?
The rocks in the tires.
So, foreign policy-wise, this is up here as a review because, you know, most of this was first semester. But from a foreign policy perspective, we've come a long way without really coming a long way. Right, back to Washingtonians, or the Washingtonian perspective of isolationism. Avoid permanent alliances, but you know, watch out for yourself. Watch out for yourself only. Don't get yourself in Europe's problems. And we see this idea carrying into Jefferson's presidency with what he called his Empire of Liberty. Spreading out, but not spreading out to colonize. This phrase, Empire of Liberty, is good for this Jeffersonian perspective of spreading out to spread out America's ideals. Buying land to spread out America's ideals. Not to influence other people, but to eventually create an empire in which liberty is not the exception, but the norm. We see in Monroe's presidency, we see in Monroe's presidency this Monroe Doctrine in 1820 that says, hey, Europe, stay out of our hemisphere, and we will stay out of your problems. And this Monroe Doctrine really becomes the action behind Washington's farewell address, that we're not going to get involved in Europe as long as Europe doesn't get involved in our place of business. And then in the 1830s and 40s, we see this full transition to manifest destiny. It's our job to spread out. We're justifying it in writing. We see it in cartoons. We see it in perspectives. You guys saw Lady Liberty on your period 4 test, for example, right? Marching across the United States, carrying the telegraph wires, scaring off the savages, right? That cartoon would have been a cool piece of evidence for your first SAQ, right? That perspective of spreading out the light and pushing away the savagery. That's what I might have used, but hey. Some examples, the Adams-Onis Treaty, the Webster-Ashburton, Oregon Territory, Texas, and the only one that really required conflict, the Mexican-American War and the Mexican Cession. But in general, we've had very limited involvement in other countries' problems, right? We've had our economically speaking, protective tariffs, so we're trying to avoid importing European stuff. We're trying to avoid being reliant on Europe for our economy. We're trying to make sure that we are just taking care of our business. We're doing what Washington said, staying out of European problems, minding our own interests. Right? One of these examples of the protective tariffs is so that American industry grows up. Right? If we can keep European competition out, then our industry can grow up. We can become a big boy economy. Right? Luis is trying to become a big boy. We're working on it. Right? He needs a protective tariff. And trying to avoid this economic dependency on European powers, while also having huge waves of immigration in this time as well from Europe. So for the most part, the way we're connected with Europe is mostly socially. We have a significant amount of social connection with Europe because most of our people are either 1, 2, or 3 generations removed from Europe. But economically, we're trying to be our own thing, politically our own thing, militarily our own thing. That continues through the 1850s, before the Civil War. We see under Zachary Taylor the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty. Again, not important. Millard Fillmore, in his presidency, is really starting to kick down the idea. Now, keeping in mind this is post-compromise of 1850, we have the whole land. So starting to kick around the idea of pursuing markets to sell stuff in Asia, getting our hands on Asia economically. Franklin Pierce is, of course, my favorite action in American history, the Gadsden Purchase. Right? Very, very important, very foundational and groundbreaking purchase of land. Right? Because it gave us that awesome skit from Jimmy Fallon. I get the Jimmys.
One of the better Jimmys.
One of the Jimmys. Yeah, I agree it's the better one, but I don't know which one's better.
Wait, which one's better?
Fallon. Kimmel's kind of, you know.
I don't know.
You guys can find out about this on Teacher State later. And under Franklin Pierce, we start to actually see the foundations of what becomes a more expansionist policy. The Gadsden Purchase, of course, very important, but the Perry Expedition is also important. We didn't talk about it at the time because it didn't matter to the fact that our country was falling apart on the brink of the Kansas-Nebraska Act and fighting about slavery. But we send the Perry Expedition to Japan for the first time trying to get our hands on Japanese markets. Japan, historically speaking, has been a very closed-off world. I'm sure you remember so deeply from AP World last year.
I do.
Good, Luis. I didn't ask if you did. This idea of Japan being a very isolated country. So the Perry Expedition is important because it shows this desire to start pushing out westward and finding more markets for goods. And then James Buchanan shows up. Fun fact, James Buchanan just sits in the White House and is scared about the Civil War that's coming. And we don't really do much foreign policy-wise. But that all changes post-Industrial Revolution. Okay? Now, while all of this is happening, Europe is imperializing. What are some of the areas that European nations are imperializing?
India, England, France.
This one, yes.
India.
Oh, Africa, my bad.
Yeah, okay, cool. Tell us about your grandfather's journal that we discussed. Is it a primary source?
Africa,
India, Africa, Indochina, modern day Vietnam. That'll play a big role in period 8. There's plenty of places in Africa and Southeastern Asia, like India and French Indochina, where Europe is getting their hands on. Now, what are we doing in the mid-1800s? No, nothing at all?
No, we're not part of that.
Before that, what are we doing in the mid-1800s?
We're
We're fighting a war over slavery. Right? The whole 1850s are marked by a huge increase in sectional tension. Then we have this whole, 4-year conflict over slavery. And then Reconstruction. We're a little busy putting ourselves back together. And then the Industrial Revolution is going to happen concurrently. So we get to the end of the 1800s with McKinley's election against William Jennings Bryan, the populist/Democrat. This big win for big business, this big win for expansion. And now, we're industrialized enough. We're not fighting about slavery anymore. We're not fighting about Reconstruction anymore. And now, for the first time, we start actually focusing our eyes outward. But it's important that you don't differentiate the fact that, yes, we're not imperialist, but we are expansionist, as you guys identified. Louisiana Purchase, Texas, Mexican-American War, the Gadsden Purchase. All those are important examples of expansionism without actually being imperialistic. And what is the difference? Luis, what's the difference in expansionism and imperialism?
Expansionism is like you said in the idea of you wanting to expand for certain reasons. Like you could say, like with the Philippines, what Kevin said, they want to help them become better.
That's not expansionism, that's imperialism. Brett.
Expansionism is when you get more land, like which has like some geographic proximity to you.
Sure.
Imperialism is taking control of a place farther.
Good. And then this piece of control is important. Like expansionism, you're spreading out your country. Imperialism, you're controlling somebody else's. So we have examples of expansionism. Only 2 examples that are also fit in this conversation that are not considered imperialism because they become equal states. Alaska. We purchased Alaska for $7 million in 1867. It seems like a good thing to buy, I guess, at the time. Everybody makes fun of Seward, William Seward. He's the Secretary of State, therefore he's responsible for foreign policy things. He buys Alaska for $7 million from Russia. Fun fact, Alaska is our biggest state, has our fewest people. And they call it Seward's icebox or Seward's folly mistake for buying this from Alaska. It turns out to be kind of cool because there's a bunch of oil there and polar bears and some Eskimos. But it was mostly just to get Russia out of the Western Hemisphere, out of North America. And then in 1898, I put the quote-unquote annexation of Hawaii, which you guys read about, which is largely done by economic interests in both sugar and pineapple. But of course, Alaska and Hawaii become states. So yes, to Brett's point, they don't have exact proximity to us. They're not next door. But they become states. So they're kind of like this in-between of imperialism and expansionism because they're not logical places to expand, which is more expansionism, but they do become co-equal states like an Ohio would in the Northwest Territory later. So Hawaii, why Hawaii? We'll start with the Hawaii as a story. Hawaii is right in the damn middle of the Pacific Ocean. Right in the middle. Hawaii, in terms of natural resources, doesn't provide us with a ton. Again, the 2 big things Hawaii gives us, sugar and pineapple. Who likes pineapples? I love pineapple. Pineapples are delicious. Right? The Dole Plantation. Who's ever bought a can of pineapples? Dole pineapples? You're guessing the brand today. Yeah. The plantation for Dole was and still is in Hawaii. And Dole, as the family Dole, had a ton of economic influence in the United States, and they wanted to become a U.S. state. And as you guys read, an overthrow of the Queen, and things get a little hectic and hairy. And now we have Hawaii. But why do we care about this little island in the middle of nowhere? Is it pineapples? Is it sugar?
No.
What is it? Provisions? What does that mean? You saw it in the book and wrote it down. You didn't know what it meant. I feel you. Story of my life.
Trade?
Trade. What about trade? We're going to sell a bunch of stuff to these little ass islands?
We can transport to Hawaii and make it to Japan.
Sure. Yeah, it's a refueling spot, a resting point, a middle, so to speak, a middle checkpoint, if you will, to launch other aspects of our influence. Another important thing, too, is we're trying to get ourselves into Asian markets. There's a lot of people in Asia. Trying to get ourselves into Southeastern Asian markets, India markets, and Hawaii is a logical resting point. All right? So now we'll get into the actual imperialistic things, but it's first important to discuss the why. Why? Why do we become imperialistic? Why does it matter? How are we going to justify these actions since we're supposed to be America and so upstanding and lovely and the like? So the first reason is social. Second reason is economic. Third reason is military. I want you to take two with your partner to identify as much justification under all three as you can, and then I'll go over my list. 2 minutes. Go for it. Go, go, go. Quick, quick, quick. Go, go, go.
Social. What do you think about turtle?
There it is.
What do you think about winter?
Why? What are these justifications? What are these arguments? How are we going to sell this to the American people as necessary? Hey, Luis. Tell your people. What?
Religion.
Extensions. Yeah, so it's like that, but also like manifest in the Mexican War. So it's not quite imperialism, but it's like the Calhoun argument, right? Like, how we're about to conquer this land and make all these Mexicans Americans. Don't worry, this time we're not. Calhoun is a good person to pull for this one there. Which avocado story? Oh yeah, that's a good story. It's not for sale. All right, sounds like you guys are done. Because the conversation slowed. So socially speaking, I heard for the most part. Also, what did you identify? What did you identify?
They're trying to reinforce their Anglo-Saxon superiority.
Yeah, and that's literally what I have up here. Good job. Right? This white man's burden, that it's our job, it's such a rough existence. We have to go to your house and tell you what to do. Well, like, what you do is not civilized enough. Let me show you the real civilization, America, who's been around for 120 years. We know best. There's a lot of religious motivation here, that it's this Christianizing of the rest of the uncivilized world. But also, socially speaking, the frontier is closed. So that should be in there as well, this safety valve ideology. That from a social perspective, where are we going to send our losers? Can't send them to the frontier anymore. Send them out to the undeveloped world and see what happens. So this frontier ideology is important to understand how this has evolved from 1890s census. Says the frontier is closed in American history. By 8 years later, we're in an imperialistic war. There has to be a connection. But the economic argument is even stronger. What did we just finish doing in America in the last 40 years? Massive industrialization. Industrialization needs two things. What are those two things? And don't say labor.
Money.
Raw materials. Markets. Or demand, yeah. Places to get raw materials, places to sell stuff. Economic motivation. The U.S. needs raw materials, the U.S. needs markets or customers or demand. And one of the things that told us this is the Panic of 1893. That we'd overexpanded our industry, we'd overexpanded our capacity, we'd overexpanded our production. So what are the two ways we can solve the fact that we overexpanded things? That's one, expand into markets, or what? We already did it. So we're producing too much, yes? We talk about the farmers are producing too much, it screws them on prices. Our industry is producing too much. Option one is expand to other countries. What's option two?
Over other countries.
Produce less. Are we going to produce less? God forbid, right? And yet it's so funny because we believe in capitalism, supply and demand. And when our supply is too high, instead of just reducing our supply, we just try to go artificially create more demand in places like Cuba and the Philippines. And we want to stay economically competitive with Europe. What are our military reasons? We don't have foreign conflicts. Why do we need military reasons? Because all great empires, it's a very next important book, I've listened to a lot of important books recently, all great empires are all driven by naval power. And if now we have all this steel, we're making our battleships out of steel, we need a place to refuel our big battleships, hence places like Hawaii. I can go back a slide. Places like the American Samoa. Places that will become fueling stations to make sure that our military power is well fueled, well resourced, well provisioned, their food, their needs, the like. And this is all coming out of an important book. I'm not going to have you read it because it's more of a military ideology. I know, but you can read it later. It's fine. From a man you should know for imperialism, because this document was on the TVQ last year. Alfred Thayer Mahan's Influence of Sea Power Upon History. So if that's not in your military box, it should be Alfred Thayer Mahan's Influence of Sea Power Upon History, because he says every empire, it's a history book basically, and he argues every empire since the beginning of time has become an empire because they could control the seas. They can control the seas trade route-wise, militarily. They had access to the control of the seas, of trade, of resources, of military people, troops. He said back to the Romans, the Greeks, the British Empire during British colonization before all their wars toppled their empire was all what did the British have that was so much better than us? A navy. That every empire always has the ability to control the seas, control the ocean. So this book is very influential in us gathering up random islands like Hawaii, like American Samoa, later like the Philippines, to justify it militarily. Good. And the last thing we haven't really talked about is this idea of expansion of social Darwinistic philosophies. That we're better than these people so we can take advantage of them. Right? Why are these people poor, according to social Darwinism?
Because they're married.
Chavez. Why are these people poor, according to social Darwinism? Because they're not qualified to be rich. Right? So why should they have control of all these awesome natural resources if we, obviously not poor, can come in and take them? Right? I'm sure you've seen this cartoon before. Ideally, Montes showed you last year. But it shows both England and America hopefully taking natives to civilization. Over things like ignorance. This is so funny. That we're saving the natives from ignorance. We're saving them from oppression. We're saving them from vice, which is like addiction. We're saving them from rebellion. We're saving them from all these things and taking them to civilization. But it's important that we look at the people that are in the British basket. Look, Middle Eastern, India, Egyptian, that part of the world that England's very involved in, whereas ours look much more islander, likely Philippines and Southeast Asia. Taking them past superstition, ignorance, oppression, vice, and taking them to civilization just like they always wanted. They asked, right? No. No. Same idea. This Christian aspect of we're baptizing these natives in the waters of civilization. It's pretty good. Now, all of these philosophies are going to come to a head with Cuba first. Here's my map. Here's my map. Who knows where Cuba's at on this map? Right there. Good, thank you, Luis. Right there.
Kind of like by Florida.
I have to go point it out. No, you're good, bro. Stay in your seat. We'll put Cuba right here. Because I don't want to write on the wall. Right about there. Is that okay with you? Close enough? Thanks, bro. So, Cuba is controlled by who? Spain, right? And the Spanish Empire is crumbling. All empires crumble eventually. Right? The Spanish are having economic trouble at home. The Spanish are having social trouble at home. There's a lot of upheaval. And when you're worried about things at home, you tend to have less control over things that are outside your home. So in this case, the Cubans begin a revolt against Spanish rule. Who were they inspired by?
America.
Us, the Cubans. Who would have inspired the Cubans to overthrow their European power? Us, yeah, us. Haiti. There's been a variety of the Atlantic world revolutions that have happened. Now it's Cuba's turn. Cuba is overthrowing against the Spanish. They start a rebellion, and Spain responds incredibly harshly. all kinds of war atrocities, prison camps, borderline genocide. The Spanish send the military. They put the Cuban rebels in concentration camps. It's very, very ugly. It's actually quite terrible. And America, from a public opinion standpoint, is going to side with the Cubans.
Didn't we make them build a canal for us?
The canal's going to happen later. That's Panama. So, America backs Cuba for 3 reasons. One, for sentimental reasons. Right? We look at Cuba like us, overthrowing their European overlords. Oh, look at the little scrappy young country trying to overthrow their overlords from Europe. So sentimentally, emotionally speaking, we like Cuba. But a way bigger argument is economic. American business has invested over $100 million a year in trade with Cuba. Sugar, rum, other raw materials. So economically speaking, it doesn't do us very good from a money perspective if Cuba is in this huge conflict and the Spanish are controlling them and now we can't make our money anymore. And also very important that politically speaking, we would like to see Spain out of the Western Hemisphere. Now we couldn't kick Spain out with the Monroe Doctrine because they already had Cuba. The Monroe Doctrine is about no more new investment from Europe in the Western Hemisphere. Spain already had Cuba. So in this case, Spain is a dying empire in the Western Hemisphere. Spain has lost a lot of other colonies, but Spain really wants to control Cuba because whoever controls Cuba controls access to the Caribbean. Cuba's kind of like the doorway. And here in the Caribbean, we have, of course, the Bahamas, but the Dominican Republic, Haiti, all these Central European countries. Cuba is the entry port, so to speak, into what is a huge market in Central America, Latin America, etc. So from a political standpoint, we realize that whoever controls Cuba controls access to all that, and there's talk about a potential Panama Canal, to your point, that we're thinking that whoever controls Cuba controls access to that canal if that canal ever happens. There's no canal there yet. So from a theoretical standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a political standpoint, we're all pro-Cuba, and yellow journalism is going to really, really, really play a huge role in impacting public opinion. I've told you guys since day one, what's the most important thing you need to win a war? Public support, right? And what sells newspapers? Headlines sell newspapers. Exciting stuff sells newspapers. If you were going to buy a newspaper, would you want to buy a newspaper that was reporting on the same story for the 15th day in a row that was boring as hell? Or was it a super exciting story you wanted to read about? So what we see is 2 important names that I'd like for you to know. William Hearst, Joseph Pulitzer. And these 2 dudes are in a huge competition for control of the New York City newspaper industry. Now, how important are newspapers in American history? Super important. America's a very literate nation. The most, as you guys saw in urbanization, the most people live in America in New York City. And they're trying to sell more newspapers. What sells newspapers? War stories, atrocities, excitement. So both of their newspapers, Hearst and Pulitzer, are going to engage in what's called yellow journalism. Sensationalism. Using enraging type of language and vocabulary, talking about all the bad things Cuba's doing, really rallying up people. Because what sells the most newspapers? War. Pulitzer is said to have said at the time, if you give me the pictures, I'll give you your war. If you give me your pictures. So if you can prove with photographs that there's bad things happening, I will give you a war. I will find a way to change public opinion so pro-war that the war will happen. It's crazy. He's right. Sensationalized news equals more readers equals more money equals more sensationalized news, and this idea of yellow journalism plays a huge role in inciting our opinion against the Spanish, pro-Cuba. So go ahead and take I'll give you 6, because I have a short chunk, just so you know, I want Chris to make sure he's awake. So 6 minutes, this is 1897, a year before the war. And Pulitzer is demanding intervention. His excerpt is there below. And the question is, how do you characterize the language he uses? And what is the purpose of his text? Treat this like a DBQ. How would you integrate this using this purpose analytical tool? All right. It's short. I'll give you 5. Go for it. You're reading. Hawaii guitar. It goes for you. He has a longer reach for you because he doesn't have a tracker. He'll get it though. I almost kicked him in the shin right now. Like he moved. Skinny or white? Yes, just like Winchell. I love how you're calling somebody else skinny. You weigh the same as Jose's left leg.
Put up 50 pounds out in the year. Type of weight 170.
Cool, read. You're not gonna put on 50 here. 50 pounds.
Have my workout yet?
Read! You should highlight the whole thing. That's called coloring.
No, I did. The link's important.
I need both questions answered in the next 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Binder, stapled together in the wrong order. Half not done.
Holy shit. Very aggressive.
Yeah, hurry. 2.5 minutes. SAQs go back to why are you so tired today? Apparently. Doesn't sound like it's not my 1 minute. I thought it was yours because you're ready. Okay. Everybody did not get a SAQ back. I have one that has no name. So. You already got yours back. I gave yours back. What? Yeah, right? 30 seconds. What? Labor versus capital? Mm-hmm. No specifics, just like saying words.
Well, let me see it. Wait, let me see it.
6, huh? 6, yeah. 6 is okay. All right. So talking about this language, Jenry, what stands out to you about the way he publishes this newspaper piece?
I said that he tries to evoke emotion in his message.
It's super emotional. What kind of emotions is he evoking?
like the connotations of the words were like sad, hurt, and like angry.
Yeah, sad, hurt, angry, abused. Who is he trying to evoke sympathy for? The Cubans, right? Like, how long shall old Cuban men and women be murdered by the score, the innocent victims of Spanish rage against the patriot armies they cannot conquer? All right, this is the only way to get news in the 1890s. And you're reading this in New York City, what are you thinking? Oh my God, the poor Cubans. These old men and women are dying. How long shall Cuban women be the victims of Spanish outrages and lie sobbing and bruised in loathsome prisons? Damn. How long shall the U.S. sit idle and indifferent within sound and hearing of raping and murder? He's evoking all the emotions. How long? With that question of how long, what is he trying to get at, Elio?
I was going to say, like, how long will it take the U.S. to intervene?
Yeah. This question of how long implies what?
Indicate us to make a change.
Sure, kind of. It's inevitable. Eventually, we're going to have to get involved. So this idea is, if it's going to happen, it better happen. How long will we have to wait? Well, I'm asking myself, for some of you, how long do I have to wait for some of you to actually give a damn about your homework? How long? How long? The way I see it is it's not inevitable because it's January and you all still don't care. So here we are. It's almost February. And the how long is answered when the USS Maine explodes. So it's cool. I have a replica of the newspaper on the back corner. It looks like George Washington's looking at it with disdain. I did that on purpose. Washington is judging the fact that we got involved in the Spanish-American War.
Oh, that's cool.
I know that is so cool.
I heard it sarcastic.
No,
thank you.
I'll buy you the real one.
Cool. He's been promising to buy me all these things, and he can't even.
You're buying
Did you buy yourself a St. souvenir right? Now.
Oh yeah, St. Jersey with Calhoun.
Cool. Good for you. Now, the U.S. sends a naval ship to Havana Harbor, and the ship blows up. Who do we blame? We have this huge. Look at this. You can't really see it that well, but it's better on that one. We show this huge example of these sea mines, these explosive devices that are in the ocean. That obviously the Spanish put them there, and it blew up our ship. Question first of all, why is our ship even there? Yeah, we're there to ensure that our business interests are being protected. And then the ship blows up, and we're like, oh my God. And the headline says, destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. $50,000 reward. For information. Assistant Secretary Roosevelt, named to play a role here, is convinced the explosion of the warship was not an accident. So what's our next logical step? War. Is this not similar then to the Mexican-American War? It really is. Like, we go somewhere we probably shouldn't be, and when something gets shot at, we're like, oh my God, how could they? There was a study done many years later that said there was not a mine at all. There was no mines. The ship blew up because the ship blew up. Because they had their big engine room, where the big coal-fired fire is fueling the ship, very close to their ammunition room. Which is really good American ingenuity. And instead, there was a malfunction. The fire got a little out of control, and it literally blew up the ship. Because all that gunpowder on a naval ship is just literally a bomb waiting to happen. Lesson learned, right? Don't smoke at the gas station. Right? That's the same idea. It's not a good idea. I don't care how bad you want that cigarette. Wait till you leave the gas station unless you feel like burning to death. So we go into this war with Spain because they blew up this ship and because public opinion is so ready. The American people, what year is this? 97, right? Does this look like it's the first thing he's published like this? No, right? So when this happens, America is ready to fight the Spanish. So we do, right? The fun slogan is "Remember the Maine and to hell with Spain." Right? We even have a cool, catchy slogan. That's pretty cool. And so we're gonna do that. April 20th of 1898. So basically a year after this. And every other newspaper is sensation that was happening. McKinley finally gives in to pressure. McKinley doesn't want to declare war on Spain. McKinley realizes it's dumb. McKinley gives in to public pressure. He asks Congress to declare war on Spain. And Congress agrees only because of the Teller Amendment. The Teller Amendment says we are only in Cuba to free the Cubans from the Spanish, and then we are leaving them alone. And Congress is like, yeah, who can argue against that? It's a pretty good, it's a sound argument. We're not there because we're getting imperialistic. We're not there to profit off these people. We are only there because these people are being abused. Pulitzer said so. By the Cubans. And once we have freed them from the Cubans, we will leave them alone forever. We'll be good to go. And we'll leave Cuba. So the Teller Amendment is important because it shows that the only way we got enough support in Congress for the war, politically speaking, is by promising that we weren't there to do anything else. The war itself is kind of a disaster. Volunteers get super excited. This is the generation whose parents were in the Civil War, or whose grandparents were in the Civil War, so they're really excited for a chance to also become veterans, to become war heroes. People get super excited. Teddy Roosevelt, there he is. Look at this guy. He's like a savage in the wild. Look at him. How's he look? He does look like a douchebag, it's true. He is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So he's a pretty high up position. He quits his position, volunteers for the Army, gathers a bunch of buddies, and they become the Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. Right? They got DMX and everything as well. And they are going to go into Cuba, and they're going to, patriotically speaking, free the Cubans from their Spanish overlords, and it's all going to be great. The war only goes for 3 months. Because I told you Spain is a dying empire. 460 Americans die in battle. 5,200 die from disease. Showing that the war itself was not that violent at all. However, the cholera and the mosquitoes and all these Caribbean diseases in Cuba are quite terrible. And it's not good. But we win the war. Life is good. And now we have another Treaty of Paris. How many treaties of Paris have we had? 3. Yeah, we got 63, 83, 98. Nice, good job. The Democrats are against the Treaty of Paris. The Republicans, because they're pro-business, pro-expansion like they've been, are going to be pro-Treaty of Paris, but some Democrats agree. And because of the treaty, the reason the Democrats are against it is because it's not just Cuba that we deal with. In the treaty, Cuba gets their independence. That's what we said, right? The Teller Amendment, good for us, good. But we also paid $20 million to Spain, and we purchased the Philippines, we purchased Puerto Rico, and we purchased Guam. Guam. It's an island in the South Pacific. So, what changed? This is a phenomenal cartoon. It was also on last year's DBQ. It's funny how that works. It was in last year's slides. Last year's DBQ was in your reading. Evaluate the relative causes of the expansion of the U.S. empire. Now we're good. We can write that DBQ. Expect that on Wednesday. Maybe, who knows? Right, we have the waiter asking Uncle Sam, well, I hardly know which to take first. At a restaurant, what are his options on the menu? Cuba, the Puerto Rican pig.
Sandwich Islands.
Filipino something.
Maybe some Filipino meatloaf. So, the treaty is important because now the U.S. is on its way to being an empire. For the first time, we have purchased overseas lands. And what is the implication of this cartoon? Take a minute to talk with your partner. What is this cartoon demonstrating about American foreign policy during imperialism? Go for it. Shout me out.
Well, it says, I already know what to take first, so it probably goes to take all of it. So,
Good.
say greed.
I'm fighting a cold, so I need to drink a ton of water to flush it all out. Thank you, my friend. Bro, why shouldn't you point? You just fell asleep in my class.
Yeah, you should be done.
I'm going to, actually. I do somewhere. Where they went, though. Montes took the rest of mine. Go to Montes. They took my whole roll. Yeah. Imperialize Montes' president after school. The president. I want to see you press the bar after school. That's a challenge, too. I will. All right. Talk to me, please. Al Shanae. What's the perspective of this cartoon? What's the point of view of this cartoon? That was inspiring. Thank you. Thank you. Kelly, talk to me. Sure. Now, is this cartoonist like this idea or not like this idea? What do you think? I think he's pro. Why do you think he's pro? No way?
I say they seem patriotic. Like
Yeah.
the flag in the background.
It's very patriotic. I heard Brett comment on the caption. I hardly knew what to take first, implying we're going to take all of it. I just don't know where to start. Right? Look, and Uncle Sam looks good and happy and not devilish. Right? So from an outcome perspective, the Teller Amendment gets violated basically immediately. We're like, oh yeah, about that. That was a cool idea at the time, but we've changed our mind. And we add what's called the Platt Amendment, which says, yeah, Cuba's independent, but they can't sign treaties by themselves. They can't govern by themselves. We have a right to get involved whenever we want with Cuba. And we're going to put a permanent naval base in Cuba for our Navy forever, back to that point about having fueling stations around the world. So it's like, yeah, Cuba's independent, but are they independent? No, right? It's like turning 18 but still living at your parents' house. That's what happened with Cuba. Are they grown? Sure. Can they do whatever the hell they want? No. Oh, is that right, Luis? I don't know. We've also annexed the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam in the process. So from an outcome perspective, we are now dealing with empire building in a way that we did not plan necessarily on doing before the war, right? So for your last question, how did the U.S. policy towards Cuba change? You'd want to see Teller Amendment, leave them alone. Platt Amendment, never mind. Oh yeah, we just realized that it's kind of cool to have boats here. We'll just leave them here. Fun fact, throughout the rest of world history, basically, even when Cuba becomes a communist country aligned with the Soviet Union, the U.S. maintains control of Guantanamo Bay, a naval base that is also used as a prison for terrorists because it's off U.S. soil, that is still controlled by the U.S. government today, and it's in Cuba. So what also happens while this takes place, though, is we get involved, once we have the Philippines, we get involved in really getting involved in the Philippines. So what happens is at the time, the Spanish control the Philippines. The Philippines are way the hell from the map, past Hawaii. They're way over here. And the Spanish fleet in the Philippines, we send our Navy immediately. As soon as the war is declared, it's almost like we were ready for this to happen. We defeat the Spanish fleet in the Philippines, and we help the Filipino rebels fight against the Spanish. Is this good?
Yes.
Yes. This is nice. Look at us go. We help the Philippines get rid of the Spanish, just like we did with the Cubans, and the Filipinos are thrilled until we don't leave. Because we're like, guess what, bro? We got the Spanish gone for you. But now we're going to control you. So good luck on that freedom that you thought you would have about 6 minutes. So after the war, we ended up fighting the Filipino rebels for another 3 years in a terribly brutal, war crime-ridden, aggressive, concentration camp motivated war to subject the Philippines to our control in a way that is a very underreported black eye on American history. We don't talk much about the Philippine-American War because it's incredibly embarrassing and damaging, and it hurts this belief that America does good in the world. Not doing very good in the Philippines. Not doing very good in the Philippines. So I have two perspectives that I want you to read. To empire or not to empire? To imperial or not to imperial? That is the question. And I have two people, both of which you should be familiar with. William McKinley, Republican president, elected in 1896, and William Graham Sumner. Who remembers William Graham Sumner? Last unit. What's his ideology? Social Darwinism. Yeah. So they're going to have two views on imperialism that I want you to read and compare. What are McKinley's arguments? What are Graham Sumner's arguments? They're both really, really good. So go ahead. I'm going to give you 7 minutes because I want you to be able to really dive into both these texts and compare the two. But stay reading. Stay on it, guys. First day of your unit, take care of your business. Keep reading. Get reading. Time singing. Come on. Read it and read it well. McKinley's argument's fascinating.
What are the arguments from
Both in favor or against imperialism. McKinley's is fantastic.
There's no us do them, so we just gotta get them. No.
What do we do? Can't get him back.
Good job, guys. Good job, good job. Really? Just sleepy? What'd you have? Travis, better hurry. You done with both? You're always tired. 20, huh? Relaxing on. Brian, why are you so tired?
I'm just tired. It's always tired.
The weather. The weather is never tired. I wish you would be a little tired often.
If you want, I can start sleeping late and sleep in your class.
Listen, yeah, I'll make that sacrifice.
Alright, I'll start sleeping in your class. I'll stay up until it's like 5 or 6 a.m. Oh, that's another shot.
1 minute left. 1 minute left.
We finished at 6.
You're more right.
Start at 6 till 6. Start at 5 till
I'll stay at 6 a.m. It's a little easier to do a push-up when you weigh 115 pounds.
You could bench like twice your weight. I can't.
I hit 245 every day. Gotta go. I trained you well.
Stretch, bro.
I apologize. I trained you well when you're.
All right. So,
That's always it's always forearm day. Not arm, forearm.
take a minute, talk to your partner. Pick one of their arguments and discuss like how compelling it is. Right? What are McKinley's arguments for keeping the Philippines and therefore creating an empire? And what are Sumner's arguments against? Right? What are they both trying to get at? Take a minute, go for it. Chat it out for me. What are they both trying to say? Go for it.
Kennedy's pro-annexation because basically white man's word, they can't give it back to Spain.
Liberty.
Good. Good. I like these texts. Texts are good.
Some people no, McCain, the bad guy.
It's funny though. He's like, I don't know what the hell else to do. But some movies like controlling somebody else is a violation of yeah. Oh yeah. Sumner's argument against imperialism is absolutely good evidence. Phenomenal.
McKinley's was like, he's like, I didn't know what to do, so I just prayed to God.
McKinley's like, yeah, I didn't know what to do. They fell into our laps. I mean, did you send your navy there? Well, yeah. Did you help free the Spanish from them? Well, yeah. Did you leave when the war was over? No. So what do you mean they just fell into our laps, right? Like, in order for them to fall into your lap, you got to be there. So, I love McKinley's argument because he's like, well, we couldn't give them back to Spain because Spain's bad. We can give it to some of our rivals, but why would we give something good to our... That's a dumb idea. Obviously, they're too dumb to govern themselves, so we can't just leave them alone. So, I prayed to God, and God didn't say no. So I assume I took it. I took God's silence for a tacit approval that He wanted us in the Philippines, so son of a bitch, here we are. Thanks, McDonald. So, I went to bed, I slept soundly. The next morning, I told the chief engineer, go add them to our map, and they'll stay there as long as I'm president. Imagine making foreign policy decisions like that. Like, well, here we are, here's this land with these people. Obviously, they can't go, they're not fit for self-government because they're not white. And I guess we're going to just keep them. Why not? It is like a dog. It's like I saw this dog wandering the streets. I saw the dog's collar. The dog's collar says he was from my neighbor's house, but my neighbor's an idiot. So I could give it to like my other neighbor, but I don't like that guy either, so I guess I'm gonna keep this dog.
That's literally me.
This dog is unfit for self-government. So therefore, this dog is now my yeah. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's even worse, like, but in this case, you didn't find the dog. You went and took the dog. And then we're like, man, like, this dog fell into my lap. Where did I find this dog? This is wild.
You did that to your dog.
Why do you always ruin good things?
That was actually good.
So,
It's true, like.
Look.
what are you talking about? I got my dog from the pound, you idiot.
Now you stole it from your neighbor's house.
Yes.
I say otherwise.
Adopt, don't puppet.
Shut up, dude. That's just dumb. Like some of your attempts at humor are like, I see an attempt.
That's not it.
That's
How?
it's idiotic.
Yeah. It's funny, man. I'm like, how funny? Like, what's wrong with you?
That's
Yeah.
laughing at you, not
That was dumb.
And or then they use adopt.
My dog also weighs more than you, so now talk to me about the anti-argument. Kat, why is Sumner anti-imperialism? It's my favorite. What are we doing with these people that hate us? Like, why are we trying to control somebody who is categorically opposed to everything America stands for? Go.
Also that we're hypocritical.
We're super hypocritical. How are we going to rescue them from Spain and be like, y'all thought we were leaving? Welcome to America. So, if we believe in liberty as an American people, go ahead.
It's just kind of like when England had their troops in America and then they didn't leave. So isn't it kind of similar to that?
Very much so. At least at that time, we were at least part of the British Empire. We came here as British people. This is worse. This is the idea that and this question is my favorite. We know what is good for you better than you know for yourself, and we're going to make you do it. It's wild. Sumner's argument makes a lot of sense. Like, these people hate our language, they hate our culture, they hate our politics, they hate our God. So who are we to then go there and tell them what to do? Unfortunately, McKinley wins the argument. Why? Because he's the president. So we have these two arguments, pro and anti-imperialism. Pro-imperialism is largely a Republican philosophy, because imperialism is good for business and Republicans are pro-business. Teddy Roosevelt, John Hay, James Blaine. The reasons we already talked about: economic expansion, political security, international prestige. I put fourth, humanitarian efforts, this white man's burden idea of being saving the world. They're very influenced by the book I already referenced, Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan's Influence of Sea Power Upon History. Social Darwinism, white man's burden, this philosophy that we are better than you, as Sumner says, but Sumner says it hypocritically. So we're going to tell you what to do, whether you like it or not. It's like racism, but for other countries instead of other races. And the important thing that I want to point out is the insular cases of 1901 to 1903. It's your next question, and it really, really matters. In these insular cases, we asked a really good question that I want you to discuss amongst yourselves. Does citizenship follow the flag? Take a minute and talk about it. Does or should, answer either or both, citizenship follow the flag? Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Pass a certain thing.
Unless you're born here, you can dumb as hell as a redneck and
Yes, until they if you become you're taking that's what morally you're
Like following the flag.
You're Mexican. If you become a citizen, that's following the flag. Being American. American citizen.
Yeah.
American flag.
Doesn't mean they're American.
So just because you're legally part of America, you're not American.
True. That was a fun argument.
I didn't even understand.
Why am I an American citizen?
Because you were born here and you're white.
No, there's a lot of people that are white not born as our citizens. Because I was born here. So then, the question is the exact same question for the Mexican-American War when we spread out. And then we're like, oh, you're not American. They're like, I haven't moved, America moved. Right, all those people in the Mexican session, right, who were of Hispanic or native origin were like, I didn't move, America came to me. So in this case, does citizenship follow the flag is a compelling question. If you are in a place that is then conquered by the United States, does that make you a U.S. citizen? From a logical or moral standpoint, what should the answer be?
Yes.
Yeah. But these people are brown. So then what's the answer?
No.
No, and in these insular cases, the Supreme Court said no. In these cases, the Supreme Court said, no, it's not where you are that determines constitutionality. Only Congress can decide if those U.S. territories will become part of the U.S. citizenship or not. Which is crazy to me. But the question is good that I ask you. This is a good AP level question. The significance is pretty obvious that now we're going to conquer places and they're not going to become citizens at all. But since the Civil War, how has the Constitution been defining citizenship? With a couple of good examples. There's a couple of things we talked about during Reconstruction. What has the Supreme Court been doing with the idea of citizenship since the Civil War?
Equal but separate.
Talk to me. What has the Supreme Court been doing with this idea of citizenship since the Civil War? How?
Making it harder to get.
Yeah.
Sure. They've been narrowly defining citizenship. Plessy versus Ferguson. The civil rights cases of slaughterhouse cases in the Supreme Court during Reconstruction. Bridwell versus Illinois that says women aren't citizens, so they shouldn't practice law either. So that, since the Civil War, the Supreme Court has been narrowly interpreting citizenship anyway, so this should not surprise us. Context matters. Plessy Ferguson, Bridwell, Illinois, the slaughterhouse cases, all of these things have been really narrowly restricting who is a citizen under the law. So of course, in this era of the Supreme Court, we're not going to grant citizenship to Filipinos. Not that I think it's right, but it shouldn't surprise us whatsoever when they rule, no, sorry, you're not a citizen. Citizenship does not follow the flag. Now the opponents, if you turn your page, I ask you a good synthesis question, if you will. The opponents of imperialism are mostly Democratic. We form the Anti-Imperialist League. People like our boy Grover Cleveland. Yeah, buddy. William Jennings Bryan. Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, Jane Addams. People you should have known already. And their arguments are going to be just like the arguments against Manifest Destiny. That spreading out and conquering people is undemocratic. The arguments against the Mexican American War. That imperializing people violates the most basic philosophy of our country, which is republicanism. Republicanism is the most important piece of our foundation of our government, which is basically just simply the consent of the governed. Did these people give any consent?
No.
Look what Sumner said. Not even did they give no consent, they hate everything we stand for. Culturally, politically, economically, religiously. And in a very John C. Calhoun-esque argument that if we imperialize, we are going to have an influx or an increase in inferior races in our country. Same reason Calhoun was anti-Mexican American War. Yeah, what? We're going to conquer that land, and then what are we going to do with all those Mexicans? Here, we're gonna imperialize these islander territories, and then what are we going to do about all those savages? Yeah. So these are, I would argue, these are good reasons to be anti-imperialism. The first two were like, yeah, good America, and then they're like, whoa, but these brown people just should not be part of it. Calhoun-esque. John C. Calhoun-esque.
His legacy lives.
Yeah, go to South Carolina. His legacy definitely lives on.
Statue?
Probably somewhere. You'll find it.
And let's go and find
some. Cool, let's not. So, these arguments I want you to be able to draw, as we get into the second semester deeper, you need to be able to draw connections over time. So being able to compare the imperialist and manifest destiny arguments, pro and con, is good. Being able later to compare women's rights with African American rights over time is good. So that question is healthy and necessary as we get to tests that are more developed and argue for bigger continuities and changes over time. So we have our boy here, Albert Beveridge. Beveridge. And he's going to release this important perspective titled March of the Flag. And I'm going to give you time to read the entirety of it. He's going to justify American imperialism. He's going to argue socially. He's going to argue economically. He's going to argue politically. He's going to give us the entirety of the imperialist argument in one block of text. So I'm going to give you 9, and then we'll wrap up with some of the post-Spanish-American War actions in the Caribbean and Latin America. Class ends. Not yet. Not yeah, I know. Time flies. So I'm going to give you guys 9 minutes, but I think you're actually going to enjoy this text, not because it's cool, because it's super racist and aggressive, and we always like people make their statements very obvious, because then we can judge the hell out of them. All right. So take 9. I want you to be able to delineate what are his social arguments, what are his political arguments, what's his economic arguments. Why is he so cool with imperializing the whole freaking world if he had his way? Keep reading. I'm going to have a good text. Quote. Good. Go for a little run. Go outside. Some fresh air. Oh. Read. Come on, guys. The idea in its context. That what do you do with soap water? Yeah. That we're gonna cook, like it's not just soap water, like actual soap water. We're gonna like civilize. What happens when what's the threat your mom always gives you when you swear as a kid? There's another chunk behind you. Oh. And you have 3 questions. You're just sitting there lounging like you're all done? You're not done? I didn't realize there's 3 questions. You have an answer to the door. I'm not going to try this here. I was just taking a quick. No, there's a time for breaks. Take a break lunch. I'm not taking a break. You got to eat some of this. So it's almost February.
It's my lesson. Business.
Don't talk loud at me about it. I'm tired of words. All right. Actions speak louder. I like people that don't talk and then get 6s on their GBQs. I wish I did. His argument is compelling, so please take extra note to how he justifies our imperialistic motives. But you know, it's about done in about 2 or 3 minutes. Read quickly, read aggressively. You right there, buddy? So socially, how do you explain that? Social supremacy, like what social and it's not political or economic, you argue is social. So racism is social, we're better than white man's burden is social. Land is spread out is social. Take 2 more. I need all 4 questions answered. I need your text done. This should be an engaging text because this guy's wild. Really wrap up today. That free dinner snack. I'm about to eat. You're about to even answer all 4 questions. Pick your pen up. I don't. What? No, I'm gonna eat right now. It's a pre-midnight dinner. 1 a.m. And then a bedtime snack. That's a bedtime lunch. My sweet joke, really?
That was tight. You can't say it. Which is like, you better get to the bathroom, then you can't sleep.
How they make it like this. So helpful. I got my fault. I do that. Brett Scott.
Somebody said Brett Douglas.
Brett Douglas. Right here, Brett. Brett Scott's big enemy, Roger Tongue. Did it dirty, bro. All right, 20 seconds. Wrap that text up. Brett Scott. I apologize for that one. I know, I told him. And I was telling him about the swimming joke. And I was like, man, there's so much shit we can do with this. I was like, you call this phone Brett Scott. He's like, damn, that's terrible.
And I'm like, so Marcus like, what's up, Brett Scott?
All right, so go ahead and just take a minute, have a quick conversation so we can finish strong. Take a minute. What argument was most compelling to you? What was most either offensive or glaringly racist or motivated by strictly dollars and cents? What argument was most compelling to you as you read Albert Bever? Take a minute to talk to your partner. Go for it. What did he say that really stood out to you in his justification? Go. 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 Go.
Those who can are capable of
Basically, American needs new markets, social Darwinism.
We need it. We need it.
White man's burden because
Mexican War.
they're white, they're not.
But that was before he's even president.
That's all I got.
Boom! That line is dirty. So, thoughts on beverage. Beverage is wild. Luis, go. Make it quick though. You tend to talk too much.
Alright, so I'll say that he represents what was the president of the Confederate? The one that
Jefferson Davis?
Yeah, the one where he's
He's the only president of the Confederacy.
yeah, where he quoted this is why we're fighting the war.
Oh, that was the vice president,
Oh.
Alexander Stevens. Ours is a white man's democracy. Sure, Chavez, give something better than that.
It says that those who aren't capable of self-government will have consent.
Yeah. Oh, we believe in consent of the governed, but these people aren't capable of consent of the governed, so who cares? He's super. I'm excited that we're going to fly the flag of a liberal government of the Philippines, and I pray God it may be the banner that Taylor unfurled in Texas and Fremont carried to the. He's referencing manifest destiny events of taking over California, of taking over Texas, of fighting Mexico. What else stands out as argument? Elian, give me something quick.
His economic argument that we have a problem with that. We're making too much in our production and we don't have enough employment.
Whose fault is it that we're producing too much? It's our own fault. We are producing more than we consume. We are making more than we can use. Our industrial society is congested. There's more workers than work, more capital than investment. We don't need more money, we need more circulation, more employment. That at least is a compelling argument. Brett, talk to me.
No, finish now.
No, okay. Go ahead, Brett.
Oh, I feel like you wanted me to say it.
I did.
Just think of the tens of thousands of Americans who will invade, mine, and field and force in the Philippines when a liberal government protected and controlled by this republic, if not the government of the republic itself, shall establish order and equality.
So, what philosophy does that back up? That we talked about over here.
The white man's burden.
Sure, there's a little more to it though. We're going to send people to go work, to go mine, to go do manual labor over there. Kind of. Yeah, that all these people that can't have work in mainstream America, they can send them to the Philippines, they can mine, they can farm, they can do all this stuff, right? Same like the frontier. Now that we have no frontier, we can back. So I'm telling you, like all these arguments are present in Beveridge. Beveridge is racist as hell, but at least he makes his arguments very blunt and straightforward. Tells us exactly how he thinks. Yeah, I like a man that says what he thinks, but I don't like what he says, but at least he said it. Talk to me, Santos.
Can we consider America an emerging superpower?
Yes, this is the beginning of America's. You could argue that from an economic standpoint, we're already a superpower because of the Gilded Age. Reasonable? Now, from a role in the rest of the world, this is the emergence of us as a superpower. So, absolutely, right? And post-World War II, we'll see more of us emerging as a political superpower impacting other countries' politics. Great question. Now, I like this quote in response. This is Senator George Ford. It's a really unfortunate last name. And my boy Warrior, he's from Massachusetts. He's a Republican, so we would think he would be pro-imperialism, but he's not. And I want to read you his quote because I think it really encompasses what America is supposed to stand for. When you raise the flag over the Philippine Islands as an emblem of dominion and acquisition, you take it down from Independence Hall. Independence Hall is, of course, where we signed the Declaration of Independence. It's still a national monument today. That if you're going to put your flag over the Philippines as a sign of domination, then your flag has to come down off of where you signed the Declaration of Independence. Over every clause, syllable, and letter of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence pouts its blazing torchlight, the power to conquer alien peoples and hold them in subjection is nowhere expressly granted. So that by going and using this American ideology to go conquer other people, you have violated everything that America was once founded for and created to do. It's a good quote. It's a really good quote. Right? I think there's good text in today. So shortly after McKinley is assassinated, we've had this nice run of presidents getting assassinated. He's assassinated by Leon Salgaz. He's an anarchist from Eastern Europe who is very turned off by the government because he blames the government for the Panic of 1893. He thinks the government is corrupt, and they're bailed out by J.P. Morgan, all that gold, and he just thinks this whole world's out to get him, so he shoots the president because that'll solve his problems. Fun fact, he does not solve his problems. He just dies instead. So gangrene, he doesn't die from the bullet, he dies from the fungus that comes. Gangrene is what happens when like parts of your body start to shut down. If you are like from frostbite, for example, you don't have enough blood circulation. So he dies from gangrene. It's a terrible virus. It's all bad. The assassin has lost his job, like I told you, and he turns into an anarchist because he thinks the government's responsible for all his problems. And he sees McKinley as this big symbol of oppression. Which, if you look at the election of 1896, what McKinley's running on is like pro business, and in a sense it is kind of oppressive to the working class. Anyway, Vice President Teddy Roosevelt takes over. A lot has changed since Teddy Roosevelt was quitting his job to go fight the Spanish in Cuba, to the point where now he is vice president. I'll tell you about how he becomes vice president on Monday because it's hilarious. And it really screws over the New York political machine, but that plays into Monday's conversation, so I'll save that.
No, after school.
No. Just like I never got to tell you guys about Trump and Jackson because he wouldn't shut up. So, under Teddy, he's president for the next 8 years, and we'll talk about all his domestic policies on Monday. But from an imperialistic standpoint, his policy for other nations is called big stick diplomacy. It comes from the phrase, speak softly, but carry a big stick. Speak softly. You ain't got to say much, but carry a big stick. Just like Moses. Sure. Right? Yeah, he didn't say much, but he had a big stick and he parted the Red Sea. Wow. So, under his presidency, he's going. What's a big stick? What's his example? What does that symbolize?
He exerts control.
When I say speak softly but carry a big stick, how is Teddy going to exert control on other countries? With force. Speaking loudly would be diplomatically. The big stick is force. Right? The question is like, what gives better results for people, the carrot or the stick? Should I treat you with motivation? That's the carrot, the motivation. Or should I just beat things out of you? Teddy is one of the stick. Right? So his approach is going to be using the military to enforce America's will on their hemisphere. Very, very important. And what you should know is this Roosevelt Corollary. This Roosevelt Corollary. What does corollary mean? You wrote it down? I'm glad. Yeah. Corollary. It's almost like the second edition. Expansion, if you will. So the full phrase is the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. What did the Monroe Doctrine say?
Keep Europe out of the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, it says keep Europe out of the Western Hemisphere. What the Roosevelt Corollary does, though, it is that not just the Monroe Doctrine, but we will turn into an international police power to enforce order in all the Western Hemisphere. So not just stay out, which is the Monroe Doctrine. Now it's stay out, and if there's problems, we'll deal with them. So if Guatemala's acting up, if Panama's acting up, if Venezuela's that's our part of the world, we will deal with the problems. So the argument of Roosevelt is that we have the right to get involved if we have interests in other countries, and those countries aren't protecting our interests. Money, basically. And it's our job to keep other countries' economies stable to keep European influence out. It's a huge shift in our world. Under him, the most important thing that happens is the Panama Canal. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. But his example of the big stick diplomacy is what's called the Great White Fleet. The U.S. Navy has a bunch of brand new, huge destroyers. And what Teddy Roosevelt does is he has them go all around the country, all around the world, showing the rest of the world how strong our naval power now is. It's like a huge naval flex on the rest of the world.
Wait,
But
don't we still do that now with like our aircraft carrier?
now they're in places for strategic reasons. This is more just to show off. Yeah. So the Roosevelt Corollary is important because it's the first time when we're going to start politically justifying intervention, getting involved in other countries' problems, fixing problems, ensuring stability. I love how it says that we're reluctant to do it. However, reluctantly, in every case of wrongdoing or impotence, we'll use our exercise as a political international police power. Something we arguably still do today. All comes off of this first legacy of Teddy saying, we'll get involved and ensure stability in other countries. That's big stick diplomacy. Some examples. The best example is the a variety of mini revolutions in places like the Dominican, Panama, Cuba, Nicaragua, Honduras, Mexico, and Haiti. So basically all of Central America and the Caribbean sphere. And in each case, we're going to send the military to ensure things go the way we prefer. Because if these countries devolve into chaos, who else might get involved? Other European countries. So we want to ensure that everything stays stable so we can keep selling our goods, buying our goods, and in a sense, we become, to Kevin's question, a much more involved international power under Teddy's presidency. The best example, if you could ask for example of big stick diplomacy, is the Panama Canal. The U.S. really wants a Panama Canal. Why is it called the Panama Canal? Because it's in Panama. And at the time, there's no sea route to get from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, but going all the way to the bottom of South America. We want the Panama Canal, but Colombia, where we're going to put our canal, says no, F you guys. This is our land. We don't want your involvement. We're good. Leave us alone. What the U.S. does instead is supports a revolt. The first time this happens in American history. It's going to happen a lot in the Cold War. We're going to support a revolt of the Panamanian people. The Panamanian people are going to overthrow Colombia, have their own independence, and then pay us back for their support by letting us build their canal. Super shady. It's absolutely brilliant, but it's super shady. And here's a good cartoon example. I don't believe it's in your notes. It might be. Nope. Nope. But what do we see here in the cartoon?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep.
New treaty.
I'll turn the lights off so you can see it a little better.
Our ships.
What do we see? What do we see?
Yeah, okay.
Got some nice boots.
Bogota.
Bogota is where? That's Colombia. So the Panamanian people are rebelling against Colombia so that we can have our... So here comes Teddy digging the canal and shoveling dirt on Colombia. And here's all our naval ships, our business ships are all going to use this canal to expedite business.
Wow.
Good cartoon. So the Panama Canal gets built. It's a great example of big stick diplomacy, of using force to get what you want. If you look at the map, here's the Panama Canal. It gets you from the Caribbean to the Pacific, so you can now cut through Central America. Very important. Very, very important. And look at what it does time-wise. Now you can get from the East Coast of New York City to the West Coast in 5,200 miles. What before was a 21,000-mile journey.
Why can't you look at that?
Where?
Like a car.
Because ships can carry way more stuff than railroads. So this isn't just economic, this is military. If you need to get military stuff to the Pacific Ocean, this is really revealed in the Spanish-American War. We want to send our fleet to the Philippines. They're like, we'll be right there. Right? And 6 months later, we're like, all right, we're ready to go. Let's do this thing. So this big stick diplomacy, though, is vital to understanding that now for the first time the U.S. is going to use force to get what they want with other countries. With debt collection, with stability. Here's another really famous cartoon. The big stick in the Caribbean Sea. There's Teddy with his cool glasses. And all these uncivilized people. Cuba, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Panama, Venezuela. And he's using the U.S. military, debt collection, stability, etc. to ensure that other countries are doing what we want. ensuring stability for the good of America. Some examples that he also uses the open door policy, should be in your notes as well, of ensuring access to Chinese markets. We send our naval fleet to China to try to get rid of what you guys should know from AP World last year called spheres of influence, where England has their sphere, France has their sphere, and we're saying, no, open door. Everybody should have access to the same market to sell their goods. Afterwards, Roosevelt sends troops to China to put down the Boxer Rebellion, which happens in more of a European or world history situation. But these people are pissed off that China's going to get foreign trade. We send our military to stop this rebellion because we want to have foreign trade in China. It's crazy. So all those examples, Panama, the Boxer Rebellion, the Dominican Republic, a bunch of examples of Teddy Roosevelt using military force, using the threat of military force. The idea is if you have a big stick, should you have to use it?
Yes.
No. Right? The idea is if I have a big stick, nobody's going to mess with me. So this idea of expanding the Navy, expanding our military authority so that nobody messes with us. Kind of. So the next thing, after Teddy leaves, and we'll talk about why he leaves, and it's going to cause a ton of conflict domestically, but Teddy steps away from the presidency in 1908, after his term and a half. He had the term he got elected on, and his half term from McKinley. He steps away, and his good friend, his vice president, his hand-picked successor is William Howard Taft. Now, Taft is massive. The rumor has it that Taft got stuck in the White House bathtub. Stuck. Taft is over 400 pounds. He's a big man. He's a big dude. The rumor apparently is false, but it's still fun to tell the story that Taft got stuck. What actually happened is when Taft became president, they installed a way bigger bathtub so that he would not get stuck. True story. Now, Taft's approach is called dollar diplomacy. Not big stick diplomacy, dollar diplomacy. Instead of using a threat of force, what are you using? Money. Investment, right? That if we invest money in Latin America, if we loan money to Latin America, if we invest railroads in China, then all those countries will stay loyal to us and we want to buy and sell good stuff to them. It's much more economic based instead of military based. Very important dollar diplomacy. So for Mexico, so for the Dominican Republic, we're going to invest a bunch of money into you, and that way we'll ensure that things are stable because we invested a bunch of money into you. And when things are stable, we can sell stuff to you, we can buy stuff from you, we can have good, strong economic relationships. We take the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary one step further under Taft to what's called the Lodge Corollary. And the Lodge Corollary says not only should England stay out of our, Europe stay out of our affairs economically, they shouldn't be even investing any money in these four countries. That economically speaking, now politically speaking, socially speaking, this hemisphere is ours to deal with. The idea here is we should be investing money in foreign nations, and that it's dollars, not bullets, for Taft. It's money, not the military, that's going to advance our authority and ensure our stability. But when you have a bunch of money invest in other countries, what happens if that money's not safe? Who has to get involved?
Military.
Think about it, guys. If we have a bunch of money invested in Mexico, what happens if Mexico is unstable? Who's going to get involved? Our military. So even with dollar diplomacy, you still need the military to enforce it. Under Taft, we send troops to Haiti, troops to the Dominican Republic, and troops to Mexico to protect our loans, our investments. His thinking is this use of force is a way to teach other nations how to establish law and order, and eventually we won't need force anymore because they'll be stable. And the last example is moral diplomacy. And we'll talk about this more so. It wasn't in your reading. It's a preview for World War I. But Wilson argues for moral diplomacy and that we should argue for democracy. If we're the most morally upstanding country, then other countries will want to be like us and put in place systems that look just like ours. We shouldn't expand, we shouldn't control people, we should just promote democratic governments and then everybody else wins. This is a nice idea, but then we back it up with military invention in Haiti, Nicaragua, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. This is why I love this philosophy that people shouldn't come in from Latin American countries because those countries are messed up. Why are those countries messed up? It's our fault. And it all starts here. We have Pancho Villa's expedition in Mexico. Mexico has another revolution right now. He creates chaos and upheaval. And under him, we see this very important document. We'll talk about more so on Thursday of next week. His 14 points to try to make the world a more morally safe place. Good. Good, good. That American ideals should help spread ideals, American philosophies. Right? But it gets us really involved in Latin American ideals.
Those glasses are fresh.
Those glasses are fresh. I agree.
He's right.
Yeah. Some real thin wires. Cool.
How do I get? Where do you get those?
So we're done. We made it. We finished. I have three cartoons to show you to end for today. Yeah. So take one with your partner. What's happening in this cartoon? What message this cartoon is trying to send about imperialism? There's a lot up here, but take a minute to talk about it while I pass out your homework. Go for it. What you got? Go for it. Shout it out. What do you see? What do you know?
Uncle was teaching those kids in the front.
It's a short one. Okay, 24.
Look at the native right next to the window. Whatever, Cuba. No, the Native American next door. Cuba.
Oh. 20 seconds. I need answers, guys.
They left them alone.
I still need to finish.
Yeah.